It goes against the concentration gradient, which is not complementary with the passive transport that goes with it. It has endocytosis. When you encounter the word endocytosis, this is the phenomena or a cell activity wherein it devours or engulfs the unwanted molecules of the cell composed in it. We also have exocytosis, protein pump, which pumps a massive amount of protein to be able to produce or generate energy. For this one, low to high. And for the last one, cells engulf, devours, or even eats large or enormous particles that need to be eliminated from the plant cell. So basically, that is the main difference between passive and active transport. So, Rai, what about the both? What do they have in common for the active and passive transport? For the first common denominator, they help maintain homeostasis. When you encounter the word homeostasis, this is the stability of various processes in the body of living forms, be it us, humans, plants, or animals. It maintains the stability of the organism. They are both utilized in cell membrane, used in cell transport, specifically to plants, how water is being transported from the roots to the different parts of a particular plant. It moves materials across the cell membrane via the cell transport. Having said that, these are the various answers for your first diagram in your activity, and I will be checking it thoroughly later regarding your output as a group. For our second question or topic that you have answered, it is all about the various parts of a cell membrane wherein you were tasked to label these parts. Let's talk about them individually. This yellow structure that you are seeing right now is composed of a series of glycoprotein. And at the end of it, you will see the carbohydrate. Having said that, at this portion of the cell membrane, at the outermost layer of it, you will encounter this purple structure that are aligned on the surface, and this one is what you call the glycolipid. And at the lower portion of the cell membrane, you will encounter this bean-shaped organelle in the form of peripheral protein. At the tip of it, you will see the alpha helix protein. The main difference between peripheral and integral protein is that the former is much smaller in diameter or say in size, while the latter, which is the integral protein, is apparently much bigger and more prominent as compared to the peripheral protein. Contrary to this, both terms is what we call the channel protein, which is evidently subfolded into two units that you are seeing right now. And at the center of the channel protein, you will see a cavity wherein different activities of cell are suspended. And for the globular protein, as the name implies, globular or globe, apparently and obviously they are spherical in shape and they are affixed or embedded on the cell wall of the cell membrane. So that's it for the cell membrane parts, which is very similar to this cross section that you are seeing on your screen right now. Proceeding to our next question are the guide questions that I have prepared. The cell membrane of the RBC will allow water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, and glucose to pass through because other substances are blocked from entering. Thus, this membrane is called, it's not permeable membrane, but it is semi-permeable membrane, When you say semi-permeable membrane, just like what I have mentioned from our recorded session that I've sent to you, it only allows selective molecules to be able to penetrate through the cell, because there are some molecules that can really harm or cause the cell to deteriorate. That is why it is one of the characteristics of the cell, of the RBC, being a semi-permeable membrane. Only selected or chosen molecules or liquid will allow the passage through the membrane. Number three, how many layers are found in the cell membrane? As you can see on your screen right now, the cell membrane is composed of a lipid, a bilayer, made up of two layers of phospholipids with cholesterols, which is said to be a lipid component. They are interspersed between them, maintaining appropriate membrane fluidity at various temperatures, be it from cold or localized heating of temperature. Number four, what are the molecules that make up the majority of the membrane? Membrane lipids are amphipathic molecules, most of which spontaneously form by layers in the form of phospholipid. On the other hand, lipid, which is very fatty in nature, molecules constitute about 50% of the total mass of most animal cell membranes, nearly all of the remainder being protein. That is why when we are talking about both plant and animal cells, it really encompasses much of the protein present in their body. Aside from protein being utilized as a molecule, it also receives an ample amount of ATP from adenosine triphosphate, or ATP for short. The most abundant membrane lipids are what we call the phospholipids. Number five, what do you call the phenomenon when you have a different concentration of materials on the inside and outside of the cell? In passive transport, substances move from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration in a process called diffusion. A physical space in which there is a different concentration of a single substance is said to have a concentration gradient, which is basically the discrepancy between osmosis and diffusion. Number six, explain the concentration of molecules when a cell reaches a dynamic equilibrium. Equilibrium is the balance of the cell, maintaining homeostasis in a particular manner. At equilibrium, movement of molecules do not stop. At equilibrium, there is equal movement of materials in both directions. If a molecule can pass freely through a cell membrane, it will cross the membrane by diffusion, not osmosis, because they are very contrary in their function or nature. This photo exemplifies the process of diffusion. The movement continues until it reaches dynamic equilibrium, or, like what I've said a while ago, the balance. Take a look at this diffusion of solutes across a membrane. This cavity is what we call the water, or tubig in Tagalog, and you can see the molecules of dye scattered around inside the membrane. So they are contained in this membrane that we have here. After some quiet time, the molecules rather, will eventually move out of the membrane, and they start to form an equilibrium wherein there is an equal amount of concentration inside the membrane and outside of the membrane, which leads and causes the occurrence of equilibrium. And for the letter B, same thing, molecules of dye, which will eventually move out of the cell membrane. And once it happens on this second image, you can see that slowly these green molecules are being converted into purple molecules. And that is why there is also an equilibrium, because there is an equal amount of both green and purple molecules present. So on the left side, you can see 3 green molecules, and on the right side, there is also 3 green molecules, which can also be applied to the purple molecules. We have 5 on the right side and 5 on the inside of the cell. So that is what diffusion is all about, and I hope I was able to explain it briefly and concisely. All right. For the number 7, the blank portion of the cell membrane functions as a barrier, while the blank portion determines specific functions, including pumps, receptors, and adhesion. The answer for that is lipid and protein. So I hope that you got it right. Number 8, what is the function of peripheral proteins? Peripheral protein is a protein that is found temporarily attached to the cell or mitochondrial membrane. We are talking about affix, so they are attached on the mitochondria, which is very evident on this image that I have provided. Okay, the peripheral membrane proteins function in support, communication, enzymes, and molecule transfer in the cell. Support in a way that the integral proteins are attached to. Basically, peripheral proteins are the basement proteins that can be found on the basal layer of the cell, and they are present everywhere and composed of a numerous amount in nature or number. Number 9, what is the function of integral proteins? They are permanently embedded within the plasma membrane. They have a range of important functions. Such functions include channeling or transporting molecules across the membrane. Other integral proteins act as cell receptors. So basically, they are very the opposite term for the peripheral proteins that I have discussed just now. They are also responsible for much of the communication between cells and their environment. And lastly, I would like to point out that integral proteins are exposed to aqueous environment, or the solid ones, a fluid rather, on both sides of the membrane, and they are used to transport molecules across the membrane. Okay. Number 10. What factors can influence or impact the rate of transport? So here I've listed some factors affecting it. First and foremost, the concentration gradient. The greater the difference in concentration, the quicker the rate of diffusion. Second one, the temperature. The higher the temperature, the more kinetic energy the particles will have, so they will move and mix more quickly and fastly. Okay. And for the last factor, the surface area of the cell membrane separating the various regions. The greater the surface area, the faster the rate of diffusion. Okay, for the last question, what is homeostasis? In biology, homeostasis is the state of steady internal, physical, and chemical conditions maintained by living things. Like what I mentioned a while ago, it is how the various living forms can process different processes in their body, being able to maintain homeostasis in theirs. This is also the condition of optimal functioning for the organism, and it includes many variables or factors such as body temperature and fluid balance being kept within a certain preset limits. And for the next question, why is it important? Homeostasis maintains optimal conditions for enzyme action throughout the body as well as cell functions. However, in the human body, which is us, obviously, this includes the control of blood glucose concentration, or the sugar contained in our blood. Okay. This is just the general process of how homeostasis is being maintained in the body of all living things that you might want to go through. We have the receptor, control center, and effector. For this concept map that you needed to answer, let's try to figure this out. Can you match the terms at the bottom to their correct spot in flow chart or concept map? For this square area, it is the possible lipid bilayer. And for this one, this process is called the passive transport. And on the right side is the active transport, which is composed of solute molecules, or solute for short. In passive transport, it occurs down the concentration gradient, while for the active, it occurs against the concentration gradient from low to high. And like what I mentioned a while ago, it does not require energy or ATP, while the active requires it. For the transport of water, it occurs via osmosis. For small ions, proton pump is being involved. However, for the transport of CO2 and oxygen, it occurs or takes place via simple diffusion. And for the transport of glucose or other sugar molecules, facilitated diffusion is involved. For the bulk transport into the cell, endocytosis, and for out of the cell or outward exocytosis. Osmosis is involved in the movement of water until it reaches the equilibrium. And for the facilitated diffusion, it requires help from proton channel. Proton pump has Na plus and K plus pump, while some examples of endocytosis includes amoeba eating, and for the exocytosis, hormone transport. Okay, and for our last pre-lab discussion for this morning, why wouldn't bacteria be able to survive on salted fish? Explain using the mount, the concept of osmosis. Salting is utilized because most bacteria, fungi, and other potentially pathogenic organisms cannot survive in a highly salty environment due to the hypotonic nature of salt, wherein any living cell in such an environment will become dehydrated through osmosis and die or become temporarily inactivated. And that is also one of the factors to be considered why fish or various species of fishes are able to survive in salt water as compared to the fresh water, because first and foremost, the former is composed of various amounts of salt that enable the fish to survive for a long period of time. And once you put the fish in the fresh water, of course, it's going to be a struggle for them to maintain their survivability, because to begin with, that is not the environment that they are accustomed to living. Okay, how does a fish in water achieve homeostasis? Freshwater fish use gills, which serves as the gas exchange that filter water as they breathe. The bodily fluids remain inside the fish. On the other hand, saltwater fish lose a good deal of body fluids into the water via osmosis. Okay. So the water loss occurs in the gills of the fish that you are seeing on your screen right now. And the moment the fish drinks water, active ion transport through the gills takes place, which is converted into concentrated salty urine or waste materials from its body. Second one, the cells in the beakers shown below are permeable to water only, Indicate the tonicity of each solution, isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic, and indicate the direction of water movement into the cell, out of the cell, or no net movement of water. For this first beaker that you are seeing right now, the tonicity of solution is hypertonic. Second image is isotonic because of the fact that water molecules are scattered everywhere and there are only few that have remained inside the cell, as opposed to hypertonic, more water molecules have accumulated inside the cell than the outside of it. And for the hypotonic, as you can see, an ample amount of water molecules are present outside of the cell as compared to the inside. And let's talk about the direction of water movement. First image, out of the cell, because apparently they are forced to move out of it. And for the isotonic, it was able to maintain the equilibrium because apparently there is no movement of water molecules that has taken place here. So the answer for that is no water movement. And for the hypotonic, obviously there's the movement in the cell. Okay. So yeah, you can just go through it for further discussion. Okay. Number 3, I think it's the last. Last na pala to. The roots of a plant have cells that absorb water from the soil. There is a high concentration of minerals inside the root cells compared to the minerals in the soil. Explain why water moves from the soil into the root hair cell. For the further explanation, osmosis is the movement of water from its higher concentration to its lower concentration via semi-permeable membrane, wherein the cell membrane of root hair cell acts as semi-permeable membrane. Various minerals and soluble organic substances are dissolved in soil water, and the concentration of water is higher in soil water than in the cell sap. Water thus moves from soil into root hair by the process of osmosis from the region of its higher concentration to the region of its lower concentration. That is definitely the factor why the water is able to move from the soil to root hair because of osmosis. And for letter B, complete each sentence below. Having said that, as a result, the soil is hypotonic compared to the root cells, and the root cells are hypertonic compared to the soil. And for the few remaining questions, is the soil hypotonic? The soil is said to be the hypotonic solution or the solution with a low concentration of solutes. Why roots are hypertonic relative to the soil? Roots are hypertonic because their activity transport ions into them. And lastly, water moves from hypotonic solution to hypertonic passively by osmosis, not actively. So I guess that ends our post-lab discussion for activity number 1. So are you guys feeling great pa? We're gonna be proceeding to our pre-lab activity number 2, and after that I'm going to be introducing you to your second activity that you will be conducting within a span of 1 week. So I'm now gonna be sharing my screen for our lab activity number 2, pre-lab discussion. It is basically about plant-water relations. Okay, wait lang class. Okay, so there you go. I hope it's visible to your screen right now. I'm gonna be putting it into full screen. Good morning once again. It's going to be our pre-lab discussion number 2 about plant-water relations prepared by yours truly. Without any further ado, let's now get the ball rolling and proceed to the learning outcomes for this course or for this particular topic. After the completion of the chapter, students will be able to discuss the importance of water with respect to plant physiological processes. Number 2, explain the process by which water is absorbed by and transported within the plant body. And for the third one, review the positive and negative effects of transpiration in plants. The chapter outline will enable to tackle the following topics that we have: properties and importance of water in plants, water absorption by the roots and its transport processes. Last one, transpiration. For our first topic that I will be discussing to all of you, it is all about the properties and importance of water in plants. As we all know, it is generally presumed that water is a polar molecule, which only means that it has the capability to bond two hydrogen to be able to form a molecule. And as you can see here, oxygen is covalently bonded to two hydrogen atoms, which is exemplified on this image that you are seeing right now. At the center of it, you can see the oxygen with both negative ion charge, and it is able to attract two hydrogen at the same time, having both positive charges. Oxygen is said to be strongly electronegative, which has the highest tendency to attract electrons that are negative in nature, or let's say in charge. Contrary to that, oxygen is also said to be partially negative charge, while hydrogen is partially positive in charge. So why am I referring to this as a partially? It is because of the fact that the other atom is negative charge while the other one is positive. So they are not very complementary with each other, which is shown in this letter B image that you are seeing right now, which is the linkages of the hydrogen molecule, making water as a great candidate for polar molecule rather. Okay. Polarity makes a mutual attraction between hydrogen bonding. Like what I've said a while ago, there are two water molecules that you can see here right now that are affixed or embedded to the oxygen molecule, and they are adjacent hydrogen molecules. So when you encounter the word adjacent, in other words, they are close or nearby from each other, which is very prominent on this image that you are seeing right now. They are adjacent in nature, both hydrogen bonds. And lastly, they are composed of water and other polar molecules that is being shown here. Okay. Let's now discuss furthermore the physical and chemical properties of water. Second on our list is that water has thermal properties. It can be categorized into two sections. First and foremost, water has high specific heat, which means that the amount of energy that can be absorbed for a given temperature rise. It is also generally presumed that it takes a lot of energy in order to rise the temperature when we are talking about water. That is why, having said that, water can either be cooling down or it can also form or give rise to localized overheating or yung excessive amount of heating that occurs in water. Second one, water has high thermal conductivity, which is the ability to rapidly conduct heat away from point of application. So away, not inward That is what I would like to take note of, away from the point of application. So let's talk about its importance. Thermal properties ensure water is in liquid or aqueous state over a temperate range. When we say liquid, it will remain its equilibrium no matter what activity might befall in the water. It will not change, it will remain stagnant. Second one, it prevents water from cooling down or heating up too fast. So there's a balance between the cooling process and the heating process of the water. And lastly, it prevents localized overheating that I've mentioned a while ago, or the excessive phenomena wherein the water becomes heated so much in the process of overheating. Okay. For the other chemical properties of water, they are said to be the universal solvent, which means that water is utilized in order to dissolve a lot of substances as compared to other fluid available out there. They are called the universal solvent because of its high polar character. So, high polar character in a way that it greatly involves the process of polarity, which is the ability of water molecules to attract more molecules having the same charges, be it positive charge or negative charges in the ions. Partially neutralizes electrical attractions between charged solute molecules or ions by surrounding the ion or molecule with one or more layers of oriented water molecules coined as hydration shell rather. So this is the hydration cells that I am referring to, that are protruding from Na plus molecule and Cl minus molecule, the former having the positive charge while the latter having the negative charge. So they are protruding in a way that they are stacked up together, forming layers. And ions cannot recombine to form crystal structures. So how are crystal structures formed? They are formed once the ions accumulate or become a cluster of ions to the point that their accumulation leads to the formation of crystal structures, which are very bulky in appearance. Okay. This makes water a suitable medium for the uptake and distribution of mineral nutrients for growth. Specifically, I'm referring to the growth of the plants. It is very essential that water is being utilized in growing or cultivating your plants, because not only water is a universal solvent, it is also used to be able to provide nutrients or any amount of energy for the growth and development of the plants that we are seeing in our environment. For the fourth physical and chemical properties of water, it has a transparency property that is visible to light. Its importance includes enabling sunlight to penetrate through the aqueous medium of cells, where it can be used to power photosynthesis and control development. In this image that you are seeing right now, you can see the cell wall of a plant wherein a chloroplast is contained inside it. Like what I mentioned from our previous discussion, photosynthesis takes place or occurs in chloroplast, which is the stacked up structure that you are seeing right now, or let's say the organelle. Since water is transparent, it enables the light to pass through it without any inconvenience, because this cell is permeable to both molecules or other factors that can affect the growth of a particular cell. And once the light penetrates through the chloroplast, you can see here the absorbed light, or the light that has been penetrated through. And the granum is a structure wherein it is composed of a stacked up of chloroplasts. And eventually, it will become transmitted light, and after quite some time, it will be reflected light that is visible to the naked eyes of humans. Okay. Fifth one, water exhibits cohesion and adhesion. What is the main difference between the two terms? Adhesion is basically the attraction of water to solid surfaces. In other words, it is how water cling to it. Sa mga puno, di ba? On how water travels from the root to the solid surface of a tree, which is a trunk or a stem. The latter, which is cohesion, it is the strong mutual attraction between water molecules. So we have been talking about attraction in the form of hydrogen bonding. That is the main advantage of water as compared to other fluid or substances. They can bond two molecules, enabling the water to work and have the mutual attraction in the process of cohesion. In relation to that, cohesion results to high surface tension, which is the accumulation of bulk water. If you're going to take a look at this, for example, do you wonder why the water spider can walk through the surface of water in the river or the pond? And cohesion is responsible for that because it has a property of having a high surface tension. Kaya class, yung mga gagamba, di ba, lumulutang sila sa water or nagfo-float dahil mataas po yung surface tension ng tubig, which results to constant pull of water into the bulk of water, and eventually it generates turgor pressure and wall pressure, which results or leads to having a turgid cell. Take a look at this figure that you have on your screen right now. It is the schematic demonstration of surface tension in a water drop, or let's say a raindrop because it's been raining these days. Intermolecular attractions between neighboring water molecules, or the heavy arrows that you are seeing right now, this, many sila in number, are greater than attractions between water and air, which is the light arrows that are present here, thus tending to pull water molecules at the surface into the bulk water. For instance, the rain has a shape of a spear, right? And do you have any idea why it is shaped that way? It is because of the fact that they are able to pull water molecules at the surface to be able to form the spherical shape of the raindrops. It's because it becomes bulk in nature in the process of bulk water or malaki. Kapag sinabing bulk, malaking pieces or malaking amount. Okay. So let's dive into water exhibits cohesion and adhesion. It can be categorized into two different types of pressure, turgor and wall pressure. The former is when the force exerted outwardly against the cell walls by the expanding protoplast that is due to continuous water uptake and flow, while the latter, which is the wall pressure, is the equal but opposite inward pressure exerted by the cell wall, which can be exemplified on this figure that you are seeing right now. Again, when we say turgor pressure, it is the pressure that occurs outward of the cell, enabling water to be eliminated from a particular cell, while the wall pressure is the opposite term for turgor pressure. For this one, it enables water to be inside of the cell until the water becomes accumulated in the plant cell. All right. Water loss or the turgor pressure results to flaccid cell. So any idea what is the meaning of flaccid? Anyone? Can you type in your answer? Flaccid. What is the meaning of flaccid? Yes. Yes, exactly, Ms. Micaela. Thank you for that. When we say flaccid, they have no pressure. They are soft. Ang opposite term ng placid is hard, right? So dahil na-lose ang pressure sa ating cell, it occurs in the process of transpiration, which is the water loss activity. And that can result to a cell being flaccid in nature. Wala na po siyang content sa loob. And having said that, when the cell becomes flaccid, it can result to wilting. Ang wilting po sa Tagalog is yung paglanta ng halaman, which is the first sign of water deficiency that occurs in plants. Because wilting can also be the result of the deficiency in the nutrients that a plant can obtain from the ground or from the soil, not only from water. There are many factors to be considered while there are wiltings that occur in the plants aside from water or deficiency in it, scarcity of water in general. Next slide. Water movement may be governed by diffusion or bulk flow. Let's talk about bulk or mass flow first. It is driven by hydrostatic pressure. I know you've encountered this term before. However, allow me to discuss what hydrostatic pressure is all about. It is the pressure exerted by water performing no activity or at rest. Again, hydrostatic pressure at rest. It occurs when the water is stagnant or no activity is being involved. That is what hydrostatic pressure is all about. It occurs when an external pressure, such as gravity, is applied. Examples: the flow of water in stream from the faucet that we use in our comfort room or in the laboratory, should I say, the water movement through the conducting cells of xylem tissue, and the water movement into roots. In addition to that, water movement can be positive or negative pressure. For the bulk flow by positive pressure, evidently the xylem vessel is highly involved in this, wherein you can see the transfer of H2O molecules into the left portion of the image, while the pressure flow in a sieve tube is involved here, wherein aside from water, sugar such as sucrose is being disseminated in the sieve tube in phloem. For the different process, you can see the loading of sugar in the form of sucrose plus H2O, and this portion signifies the uptake or consumption of water by the plants. And for the third one, you can see how slowly the sugar is being unloaded from both xylem and phloem. And for the final step, that is where the recycling of water takes place. Okay. Now, let's talk about diffusion. It is the directed movement from a region of a high concentration to a region of lower concentration, primarily of solutes and gases. One of the importances of diffusion is that it enables the occurrence of what do you call it? Neutralization. Kapag sinabing neutralization, it is the ability of diffusion to distribute an equal amount of solution to the pure solvent. So as you can see here on your screen right now, this is the initial appearance of the solution without undergoing diffusion. And once the diffusion takes place or occurs, it is very evident that the solution has been equally transferred to the pure solvent from high concentration to a region of lower concentration, enabling the equilibrium of the solute particles. And what is osmosis, by the way? It is the diffusion of water across a selectively permeable membrane. This example shows you how osmosis works. Basically, these are the various water molecules that are not permeable to the pure solvent. And for the second image, you can see that the water molecules have stayed in the solution. It's because of the fact that they are not permeable to pure solvent. Sinasabi po dito na selectively permeable, and that is one of the reasons why these molecules were not able to penetrate through the pure solvent or the right portion of this image that you are seeing right now. Okay, now for the remaining slides that we have here, let's discuss the water absorption by the roots and its transport processes. Water movement through a plant can be discussed in various steps. Absorption of large quantities of water from the soil, translocation of water through the plant, and for the final step, loss of water to the atmosphere as water vapor. Okay. For our first topic, let's talk about and deal with the water uptake by the roots. So this is the general structure of the plant's roots. Present here, this unfolding, which is what we call the cortex, and at the lateral portion of it, you can see the exodermis. And on the medial portion or region, you can see the apoplastic pathway where water is being transported to, as well as the pericycle, which are the dotted or holes that can be found on the surface of the exodermis. And it occurs in the process of membrane crossing or aquaporins. The difference between open and closed aquaporins is that what we call the aquaporin gating. So obviously for the open, it enables the entrance of the water freely without any obstacles. And as for the closed, very opposite of the open, it traps water inside. This is the cross section of the roots. Primarily, you can see different region. For the upper region, the region of maturation. For the medial region, it is the elongation. And for the basal region is the apical meristem. For its parts and other properties, we have the endodermis, which is the superficial layer of the roots. It is also encompassed by pericycle. The xylem is right over here, located at the center of the roots, and the main function of xylem is that it allows the transport or transfer of water from the roots to the other organs of not organs pala, to other parts of the plants such as the stem, the leaves, and etc. Essentially, xylem is really important because it enables the growth of a plant. On the other hand, phloem, which surrounds the xylem, the main function of this phloem is that it transports amino acids and sugar to the different parts of the plant. Kung sa xylem, tubig lamang yung tinatransport niya. Sa phloem naman, other minerals and nutrients. Alright. For the cross-section of the plant root, take a look at this figure that I have provided. So, figure 4.3 exemplifies the pathways for water uptake by the root. Via the cortex, which is right over here, water may travel via the apoplast pathway and symplastic and transmembrane pathways. So basically, water has two routes to travel to. Again, it's apoplast and symplastic pathway. However, guys, in the symplast pathway, water flows between the cells. So apparently, there are many cells that are affixed in the codex. These are the cells that I am talking about. And through this pathway, the water has the ability to penetrate through it, allowing the entrance of water to the cortex. Okay. Water flows between cells through the plasmodesmata without crossing the plasmembrane, and in the transmembrane pathway, water moves across the plasma membranes with a short visit to the cell wall space, which is right over here. You can find both xylem and phloem in the cell wall space. And at the endodermis, which is exemplified on this cross section, the apoplast pathway is blocked by the Casparian strip, which is located at the medial portion of the endodermis. So generally, this is the cross section of the roots and how water is being transported from the basal root to the other parts of the, what do you call it, the plant, including the leaves, stems, trunk, or flowers. For this portion, I will discuss the water transport through the xylem. This structure is what we call the xylem generally. Tracheids and vessels. So this is the tracheids. The right portion, vessels, is located on the left, form a series of parallel, interconnected pathways for water movement. And these are the parallels that I am talking about. They are very aligned in size, right? Very uniform. Cavitation blocks water movement because of the formation of gas-filled or embolized conduits, and this is the conduits that I am talking about, or the fluid cavity that are present in the xylem, not on the phloem. Because xylem conduits are interconnected through openings, or what we call the bordered pits, in their secondary walls, water can detour around the block vessel by moving through adjacent tracheary elements. And the very small pores in the pit membranes help prevent embolisms from spreading between xylem conduits. Thus, in the diagram on the right, which is right over here, the gas is contained within a single cavitated tracheid. However, in the diagram on the left, which is right over here, gas has filled the entire cavitated vessel, shown here as being made up of three vessel elements. Each is separated by scalariform perforation plates that are scattered everywhere. And these are the plates that I am talking about that generally block the entrance of the water. In nature, vessels can be very long or elongated in size, and having said that, they can be uniform as well, which means that they have the same size. There is no smaller and there is no more elongated, up to several meters in length, and thus made up of many vessel elements that are present here. These are the vessel elements that I am talking about, which allows the facilitation of water molecules throughout the entire xylem, and they are very numerous in number. Now, let's discuss the cohesion tension theory. It describes how water from ground level move to the top of a plant. It states that the driving force for water movement in the xylem, wherein transpiration or the loss of water in the atmosphere through evaporation of leaf stomata, and it results to tension. That is what cohesion tension theory states. This figure shows the schematic representation of water flow through the plant, or the arrows that you are seeing right now. So basically, water is absorbed by the roots via the phloem, and it will go up until it provides nutrients to the different parts of the plants, such as the stem, the wood, the leaves, or the flowers. And by analogy with the oil flow through the wick of an old fashioned lampion or lamp, that once you put oil or gas at the container of a lamp, the process will go up, which enables the lighting of the lamp. Same thing with the roots, uptake of nutrients and water. For the remaining slides that we have here, let's discuss transpiration or the loss of water. Loss of water from the plant in the form of water vapor, small amount through lenticels. When you encounter the term lenticels, these can be found on trees. Ito po yung mga bilog-bilog na nahanap sa superficial portion of a trunk, which serves as a gas exchange for molecules. It encompasses the largest proportion, approximately 90% from the leaves. In this figure, you will see the diagrammic representation of a typical mesomorphic leaf and the species Acer aspi shown in cross section. Now, having said that, let's discuss the leaf anatomy. Cuticle is made up of cutin. When we say cutin, it is the water repellent substance or structure that are present in the cuticle. So, water resists water repellent. So, it does not dissolve with the water, and they are embedded in a matrix of very hydrophobic cuticular waxes. What is the meaning of hydrophobic? Anyone? Can you type in your answer? When you encounter the word hydrophobic, it is the opposite term of hydrophilic. Thank you very much, Miss Trixie. Water fearing, kaya may phobia sa word na hydro. It means that it does not dissolve with the water. That is why, like what I mentioned a while ago, cutin is repellent to water. It does not mix well in that. And the opposite term is, once again, hydrophilic or water loving. Highly resistant to diffusion of both liquid water and water vapor from the underlying cells. And let's discuss stomata. These are the small pores which are present here that interrupt the epidermis and the overlying cuticle. And it is comprised of guard cells that regulate. Wait, I'm gonna have my water first. Okay, guard cells regulate or control the closure and opening of stomata. Note especially the presence of a cuticle covering the outer surfaces of both the upper and the lower epidermis. Note also the extensive inner cellular spaces with access to the ambient air through the open stomata. And this is the space that I am talking about, where various cellular activities take place. Mesophyll, on the other hand, is the photosynthetic interior cells that create an interconnected system of inner cellular air spaces known as substomatal spaces. This fluid white cavity that you are seeing right now is what we call the substomatal spaces. For the transpiration process, it is said to be considered as a two-stage process. First and foremost, evaporation of water from the moist mesophyll cell, those bordering substomatal air spaces, into substomatal airspace. For the peristomal evaporation, another view suggesting that water instead evaporates from the inner surfaces of the epidermal cells in the immediate vicinity of the stomata. And for the second stage process, diffusion of water vapor from the substomatal space into the atmosphere, which can be categorized into two types rather of transpiration. First on our list is what we call the stomatal transpiration. It is basically the diffusion of water vapor through the stomatal pores, makes up about 90 to 95% of water loss from leaves. And as for the cuticular transpiration, small or exiguous quantities of water vapor can still pass through, which roughly makes up 5 to 10% of the lost water. And for the lenticular transpiration, which occurs in lenticels of a plant or a tree, it is the entire loss of water, leaving about 0% of the transpiration process. So again, we have stomatal, cuticular, and lenticular transpiration. And for the last topic that I will be discussing to all of you are the factors influencing transpiration rate. It can be divided into two. First is the environmental factors, which includes humidity, temperature, and wind. Second one, resistances encountered by the diffusing water molecules both within the leaf and in the surrounding atmosphere. As for the environmental factors, first is the humidity, which is the actual water content of air, especially now, especially now in the current state that we are in. There are some days wherein the air is really sultry or mainit, di ba? It's because of the climate change. It plays a great factor on how we can regulate the humidity that occurs in the air. As for the relative humidity, it is the ratio of the actual water content of air to the maximum amount of water that can be held by air at that temperature. So the lower the relative humidity is, it results to water vapor pressure and can lead to a higher transpiration rate or the loss of water. Second factor to be considered is temperature. The higher the atmospheric temperature is, the higher the leaf temperature will be, which can result to a higher vapor pressure gradient and high transpiration rate. So what I'm trying to insinuate here is that the higher the temperature is, the higher the loss of water is going to occur or befall rather. Okay. Okay. Last two slides. Wind. Wind speed modifies or alters the length of the diffusion path for existing water vapor molecules, wherein the higher the wind speed is, the lower the boundary layer, which can lead to a lower diffusion path length and higher water vapor pressure that can result to a higher transpiration rate. On the other hand, thickness of boundary layer is influenced by leaf size, shape, and pubescence. Lastly, a thick boundary layer is maintained as it breaks up air movement over the leaf, which can lead to a low transpiration rate. And for the second factor to be considered is the resistances. The resistances encountered by the diffusing water molecules both within the leaf and in the surrounding atmosphere. It can be categorized into three sections rather. We have the inner cellular spaces or the stomata and the stomatal force. Resistance is variable or factors. And for the third one is the boundary layer, which is basically a layer of undisturbed air on the surface of the leaf. So once again, we have the inner cellular spaces, stomatal pores, and boundary layer. So I guess that ends our pre-lab discussion for lab number 2. For our next F2F class, we're going to tackle photosynthesis, which will be on site. So once again, you are required to show up to the university for you to be able to carry out this experiment. So before I give you your activity, do you have any questions or clarifications so far regarding the post-lab discussion for lab 1 and the pre-lab discussion for lab 2? Or clear naman po ang ating discussion? Okay, that's good to hear. But still, if you have inquiries or concerns that you would like to raise, kindly send me a personal message on my FB Messenger account. And the reason why our discussion was a bit long is for you to have a refresher na maintindihan ulit yung plant-water relations, because as what you've mentioned to me, it's been 2 years since you've had your Gen Physio. So I'm just trying to give you an overview about the topic that we will have in the upcoming weeks. And lastly, I will show you your activity that you'll be conducting this entire week. Again, it is a group work, so I hope that you can accomplish it by means of being able to coordinate with your leaders or your group mates. Papakita ko lang siya sa inyo class and then we're good to go. Lab exercise number 2, plant-water relations. You can see the intro here, the objectives that you might want to go through, and how I grade your lab activity. Same thing as before, write your section, group number, leader, and the 5 members. So what you have to do for the letter A is the transport in plants. You just have to state the function of the following components, xylem and phloem. It doesn't have to be long. What matters is how you're able to explain it briefly, what they are used for. Second one, Second one is look at the following images. In each one, label the xylem and phloem by means of showing arrows. I've taught you that before sa ating pre-recorded video. Just make a drawing if you are using Google Docs. Tapos, yeah, and draw an arrow, and you have to indicate where xylem and phloem is. These species is the Zea stem. For this one, the Erica leaf, Dicotyledonus. And number 3, look at the sketch below and label the xylem and phloem in each. Also, label of the diagrams as leaf, stem, or root. So this is the image that I am referring to. And 4, letter B is the water uptake. Look at the images below of root hair cells, and you have to draw a single root hair cell on the box. And don't forget to answer these following guide questions just right after the first one. B, tama ba? Letter C pala, sorry. Ayaw mabago. Basta I will change it later. So, ito yung letter C, transpiration. Define it, the meaning of that process. Basically, you have to answer the guide questions as simple as that. And for the number 4, explain the effect of the following to the rate of transpiration from a leaf: temperature, humidity, wind speed, light intensity, and water supply. Explain why plants wilt. Bakit po sila what do you call it? Nalalanta in Filipino. And for the last one, letter E, translocation. Define translocation. And don't forget to answer the table that you have here. Of course, you have to input your group members here as per their contribution, kung ano po yung specific topic yung kinonduct nila or ginawa, and I will rate them according to the contribution that they have. So you have 1 week to have it submitted, and I think that will be enough naman for you to accomplish this activity. And for those who have not turned in yung activity number 1, you have until 11:59 p.m. today to do it, so that I can check your output or work. So once again, no more questions. Is everything clear so far before I dismiss or adjourn the meeting? Okay, it's 11:20, and I suppose that you're all hungry and about to have your lunch. If there's no more questions, once again, it's been a pleasure meeting you all. BS Bio 4-5. I hope you stay safe and dry because right now it's drizzling here. Medyo umaambon-ambon, and sana magstay safe kayo sa comfort ng inyong bahay. Again, I would like to reiterate that I will meet you next week during our F2F lab activity about photosynthesis. If you can bring your laboratory gown, do it para maisuot nyo siya. And I will upload the materials that you will be bringing per each group, kung saan lahat na po kayo ay may grupo na, right? And you were able to choose your leader. So, meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for your time. God bless you all, and you may now leave the meeting room. Bye everyone. Ingat po kayo. Stay COVID-free and stay hydrated. Thank you. Bye.